He thought she would stay, thought she'd always be there, waiting, forgiving, understanding. He got used to her patience, her softness, her effort. So when she finally walked away, it didn't register as real at first. He assumed it was just another quiet storm that would pass. But this time, she didn't come back. And when she left, she didn't slam the door or try to hurt him. She left the way people do when they've already cried all the tears they had. Calm, collected, done. She didn't scream, didn't beg for change, didn't try to make him see her worth one last time, because she already knew her worth. And when you know your worth, you don't stay where it's not being honored. You don't stay to prove anything. You walk away because your peace matters more than potential. And that's when it hit him. Not in the moment she walked out, but in the moments after. When he looked around and realized the calm he once took for granted was gone. That the one person who saw the best in him had decided to stop settling for his worst. She left with dignity. And that's exactly why he stayed, with regret. She stopped waiting for him to realize what he had. That was the first moment everything changed. For so long she had been patient, quietly hoping he would grow into the person she believed he could be. She saw the glimpses, those rare moments of affection, those brief spells where he seemed to meet her where she stood. But they were fleeting. He was inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, and often careless with her feelings. She kept thinking if she loved him harder, showed up more, communicated better, he would finally wake up and see her. But there comes a point where even the most forgiving heart grows tired. She had been investing in potential while he was spending her presence like it was infinite. And when she finally stopped waiting, it wasn't dramatic, it was subtle. She stopped initiating conversations, stopped explaining herself, stopped trying to fix what he refused to even acknowledge was broken. That shift wasn't about punishing him, it was about reclaiming herself. He didn't notice the beginning of her detachment. That's how slow it was. Like watching color drain from a photo in slow motion. She had given so much of her energy trying to hold them together that the silence felt foreign, even to her. But over time, the clarity grew. She realized she was addicted to potential, not reality. She had fallen in love with who he could be, not who he consistently was. And once you see the difference, you can't unsee it. She had bent herself into a version of someone always adjusting, always forgiving, always absorbing emotional bruises in the hope they would lead to something more. But when you start choosing peace over chaos, your tolerance shifts. The things you once excused start feeling heavier. The hope you clung to starts feeling like weight instead of wings. And when that internal shift happens, walking away doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like a return to self, to strength, to sanity. Meanwhile, he was still under the illusion that she'd never leave, that she loved him too much to give up. He thought her love was unconditional, without understanding that even the most unconditional hearts have limits. Love can be infinite, but tolerance is not. He had confused loyalty with weakness. He mistook her empathy for naivety. And when she finally stopped showing up the way she used to, he noticed, not because he missed her messages or attention, but because something deeper was missing. Her energy, her belief in him, her presence that made everything feel a little more anchored. And by the time he realized it, she had already emotionally exited. Her goodbye wasn't loud. It was a whisper that echoed louder than any scream ever could. He began replaying old memories, reading into past messages, wondering how he didn't see the signs. How did he not notice the fatigue in her voice when she said she was okay? How did he miss the way she'd stopped asking about his day? Stopped reminding him of his worth? Stopped softening herself just to make him feel strong? It's always easier to see clearly in hindsight, but clarity doesn't comfort when it's too late. Regret is cruel like that. It gives you perfect vision just after the door closes. She didn't need revenge. She didn't want him to hurt. She just wanted peace. But her absence became its own kind of justice. It spoke to him in the silence of long nights, in the spaces she used to fill with laughter and compassion. And no matter how many distractions he sought, there was no escaping the truth. She had been rare and he let her slip through his fingers while chasing things that never held the same depth. She had been his safe place, and now she was gone. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she finally started loving herself more. And that's the part that stings the most for him. Not the fact that she left, but the way she left. With dignity, with grace, with the kind of quiet strength that doesn't need validation. She didn't need to burn the bridge. She just chose not to cross it anymore. He's left staring at the ashes of something he never truly nurtured, knowing that no one else will ever bring him the peace she did. She walked away with her head held high, and now he walks around haunted by the version of himself that only she ever believed in. He didn't realize that silence could be louder than words. When she finally stopped explaining herself, when she no longer felt the need to justify her hurt, her absence became the most deafening message she ever sent. For so long, she had been the one who brought everything to the table: her love, her effort, her patience, her forgiveness. She kept showing up, even on days when he gave her every reason not to. She argued for the relationship when he was indifferent. She reached out after arguments, made peace after his cold spells, and continued giving chances after he gave her broken promises. But there comes a point when a woman realizes that her voice is falling on ears that have no intention of truly listening. And when that realization hits, she doesn't yell, she doesn't beg, she simply withdraws. Not as a game, not to get attention, but because continuing to pour into someone who only ever sips when it's convenient becomes too painful. He always thought she'd stay, that she would always come back, always be the one to fix things. He mistook her resilience for permanence, so when she started growing quieter, more distant, he thought she was just going through a phase. He assumed she'd rebound like she always did. But what he didn't know is that silence from a woman who's always tried is not indifference, it's resignation. It's the sound of her heart finally realizing that staying is costing her more than leaving ever could. And while he went about his routine, still choosing distraction over presence, she was slowly reclaiming pieces of herself that had been buried under years of compromise. She no longer had the energy to correct his behavior. She stopped trying to teach him how to love her, how to speak to her, how to show up. She let go of the hope that one day he would see her the way she saw him. And that kind of silence isn't empty. It's full of everything she once wanted to say, but knew it would change nothing. She knew that real connection doesn't need constant justification. It doesn't require someone to keep proving their worth just to be treated well. She realized that love without respect is manipulation, and affection without consistency is just a performance. He began to notice the difference, but not right away. At first, her calmness confused him. Her lack of reaction made him feel like maybe things weren't so bad. But over time, her peace became unsettling, because he could sense that she no longer needed him to make sense of things. Her peace wasn't a pause, it was a conclusion. And the most heartbreaking thing he would come to understand was that she didn't leave out of anger. She left with clarity, with her heart intact, with no more expectations for someone who had every chance to rise and chose not to. He started feeling the gap she left, not just in the space beside him, but in the way no one else made him feel truly seen. Because when she loved him, it was full and honest. She saw past his defenses, she nurtured his potential, she stood by him through seasons when even he doubted himself. And now, in her silence, he was left with nothing to reflect back at him but the truth. She had been a gift he took for granted. Every time she tried to talk, he dismissed it. Every time she reached for understanding, he shut down. And now, the stillness that surrounds him isn't peace, it's punishment. The kind that doesn't scream or blame, but simply doesn't return. She moved on, not with bitterness, but with wisdom. She carried herself with the dignity of someone who knows they gave it all and still chose to walk away because they deserved better. And that strength, that quiet, composed departure, that's what haunts him. He stayed the same and she evolved. He clung to comfort while she chose growth. And no matter who he meets now, no matter how attractive or exciting they are, he'll always remember her. The one who gave him everything until she had nothing left to give. The one whose silence said, "I'm done," louder than her words ever could. She never needed to prove her worth. He just failed to see it. That was the hardest part for him to swallow after she left. He thought he had time. He thought she'd always be there. Maybe he assumed that her love was unshakable, that her loyalty was guaranteed, no matter how little effort he put in. He thought he could keep showing up, halfway, distracted, inconsistent, and still have her waiting with open arms. But she wasn't the kind of woman who needed him. She chose him. And when someone who chooses you every day suddenly stops, it cuts deeper than any fight or dramatic goodbye ever could. He didn't realize what it meant to be loved by someone who was gentle with his flaws, someone who stood by him through uncertainty, someone who saw the best in him even when he couldn't see it himself. She wasn't loud about her love, but it was steady. She didn't make grand declarations, but her consistency was a love letter in motion. The way she listened, the way she remembered the small things, the way she kept showing up, even after disappointment, that was her language. And he misunderstood it as something that would never fade. But there's something powerful about a woman who's been taken for granted one too many times. She reaches a point where the silence inside her becomes louder than the love that once led her. Not because she stopped caring, but because she started caring about herself more. She remembered who she was before she got lost in trying to prove she was worthy of being treated right. She realized she never had to earn the basics: attention, respect, effort. And once that switch flips inside her, she doesn't look back. He thought he could keep her by giving her just enough to stay hopeful. A few nice words, a compliment after a long drought of indifference, a little affection when he sensed she was pulling away. But women like her don't leave because they're unloved. They leave because they've outgrown the version of love they've been settling for. She didn't leave in anger, she left in clarity. And that clarity changed everything. Now he watches from a distance, whether literally or through the echo of her absence in his life. He sees her moving on, glowing again, laughing in ways he hadn't heard in a long time, not because someone new walked in, but because she reconnected with the parts of herself she had muted in the relationship. He sees her peace, and it unsettles him, because it confirms something he didn't want to admit. She didn't need him to be whole. He was never her oxygen. He was just the chapter that taught her how to breathe deeper on her own. She didn't post bitter quotes. She didn't try to make him jealous. She simply disappeared from the emotional landscape of his life. Her phone stopped lighting up with check-ins. Her energy stopped filling the space. Her love, which once covered the cracks in their connection, stopped showing up to do the heavy lifting. And in that stillness, in that quiet exit, he was left to feel what he never expected: emptiness. Not because she was dramatic or dependent, but because she was the soul of their connection. She was the one who brought warmth, the one who brought depth. Without her, everything felt flatter, colder, more shallow. He didn't just lose a girlfriend, he lost the person who made life feel a little more beautiful. And it's only now, in hindsight, that he realizes how rare that kind of connection is. But that's what happens when someone forgets that love isn't permanent by default. It's nurtured by presence, by appreciation, by showing up when it matters. He thought he had forever, and now he's left with the echo of what could have been. She moved forward with grace, not because it didn't hurt, but because she chose to heal instead of holding on to someone who couldn't meet her where she was. And that decision, that strength, that peace, that's what he'll remember most. She didn't walk away to teach him a lesson. She walked away because she had finally learned hers. For too long, she confused patience with passivity. She mistook loyalty for self-betrayal. She kept holding space for a man who wouldn't meet her halfway, hoping that one day he'd rise to the version of himself she saw in her head. But after enough letdowns, something shifted. Not in a loud or dramatic way, just a quiet inner click, where she realized she was done trying to fix what someone else wouldn't even admit was broken. That kind of shift doesn't come from anger, it comes from exhaustion. Emotional fatigue wears down even the strongest hearts. It's not that she didn't love him, she did, deeply. But love isn't enough when you're the only one doing the work. She used to over-explain her feelings, try to bridge the gap, soften the conflict, and make excuses for his inconsistency. She thought if she just loved him better, more purely, more selflessly, maybe he'd start to show up the way she needed. But when someone's not ready, it doesn't matter how worthy you are of their love. They won't see it until it's gone. And that's the part that keeps him up at night now. 'Cause deep down he knew she was different, not just in how she loved him, but in how she carried herself. There was a depth to her that scared him sometimes, like she saw through all his distractions, his detachment, his defense mechanisms. She didn't react with judgment, she met it with understanding. But even understanding has a shelf life when it's not met with action. She wasn't asking for perfection, she was asking for presence, for effort, for truth. And over time, he gave her more excuses than he ever gave her answers. So she stopped asking, she stopped begging for clarity, she stopped trying to decode his mixed signals, she stopped rearranging her needs to fit into his comfort zone. And when she finally left, it wasn't an explosion, it was a slow fade that he didn't notice until the silence was deafening. That's what he regrets now. That he mistook her softness for weakness. That he didn't realize her grace was a gift, not a guarantee. He stayed with regret because he thought he had time. He thought she'd always be there, waiting just a little longer. He thought one more apology would buy him another chance. But when a woman like her chooses herself after choosing you for so long, there's no convincing her to return. Not because she hates you, but because she finally loves herself too much to go back. Now he scrolls past her pictures, haunted by her glow, not because she's flaunting her happiness, but because she's finally at peace, and that peace is louder than any cry for attention ever was. He sees the joy in her eyes, the calm in her energy, and it hits him harder than anger ever could. She looks free, and it's that freedom that breaks him, not because she's moved on, but because she's moved beyond needing his validation. He'll replay the moments he dismissed her feelings, the nights she asked for presence and got preoccupation, the times she showed up with love and got distance in return. He'll remember how she waited, hoping he'd grow into the man she believed he could be, and then he'll remember the day she stopped waiting, not with tears, but with certainty. And what stings most is that he wasn't ready to love her, but now he's not ready to lose her either, except it's already happened. She's not the same woman he took for granted. She's wiser now. She's protective of her energy. She's building a life that doesn't need his presence to feel whole. And though she may still care in the quietest corners of her heart, she's no longer willing to compromise her peace for the hope of his potential. That's what makes regret so heavy. It's not just about losing her. It's about knowing she gave him every chance to do better. She stayed long enough for him to meet her where she was, and he didn't. And now every memory, every missed call, every unread message reminds him, not of her leaving, but of all the moments she stayed longer than she should have. That's the kind of loss that it lingers because it was preventable. And that knowledge is the heaviest part of all. He underestimated the strength it takes to leave quietly. He assumed that if she didn't shout, cry, or slam the door on her way out, it meant she was unsure of her decision. But in truth, the stillness of her exit carried a finality that no dramatic scene ever could. She had given so much of herself, her love, her time, her forgiveness, that there was nothing left to explain when she finally walked away. Silence became her loudest statement, and that silence now echoes in his life like a song stuck on repeat, one that reminds him of everything he lost. What he didn't realize is that her dignity was her power. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to prove a point or expose his faults. She just needed to reclaim her peace. That's what dignity does. It prioritizes self-respect over emotional chaos. While he was still playing games, avoiding vulnerability and seeking validation elsewhere, she was growing. She was learning how to heal without closure, how to love without losing herself, and how to let go without bitterness. And that quiet evolution scared him more than any argument ever did. He didn't notice the turning point, not at first. It happened slowly, in the way she stopped asking where he was, in the way she no longer lit up when his name appeared on her phone, in the way she pulled her energy back, one day at a time. She was still kind, still graceful, but something was different. The emotional leash he had once felt so sure of had vanished. She was no longer trying to make him stay, no longer desperate for crumbs of affection. And that's when he felt it, the beginning of the end. He just didn't know how final it would be. The regret came after. After the parties, the distractions, the ego-driven choices that seemed harmless at the time. After the women who were temporary bandages on a wound he refused to look at. After the silence settled into his world like fog, dull, persistent, unshakable. Regret has a funny way of creeping up when the noise dies down. It doesn't scream, it whispers. In memories, in the absence of her laugh. In the moments when he realizes she hasn't reached out, hasn't checked in, hasn't looked back. He thought he'd be the one to walk away first, thought he held all the power. But now he's stuck in a loop, wondering how someone so patient, so forgiving could leave without warning. What he failed to understand is that love doesn't vanish overnight. It fades through repeated disappointments, through 1,000 tiny betrayals, through words not followed by actions. By the time she left, her heart had already been packing up for months. He just chose not to see it. And now he's left holding the weight of what could have been. He replays the last few weeks before she left, looking for signs. Was there a moment he could have changed everything? Was there a last opportunity to choose her fully? The truth is, there were dozens. But each time, he chose comfort. He chose selfishness. He chose avoidance. And now, he's alone with his choices, realizing too late that someone who values herself enough to leave will never return to the version of you that made her feel small. What he misses most isn't just her presence, it's the way he felt in her presence, safe, seen, loved without having to earn it. She gave him something rare and he mistook it for something replaceable. But he's learning now that not every woman will fight for someone who won't fight for her. Not every woman will keep choosing you when you make her feel like an option. Not every woman will stay when her soul is starving for more. She left with dignity because she knew she didn't have to destroy him to prove her worth. She just had to remove herself from the cycle. And now he sits in the stillness she left behind, understanding that the emptiness he feels is not just about her absence. It's about his inability to rise when he had the chance, because dignity doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It simply walks away when it's done, hoping. And that walk is what haunts him most. By the time he realized what he had, it was already gone. And the most painful part? She didn't leave angry, she didn't break things or raise her voice. She left with her head held high, with grace in her step, and with a kind of calm he couldn't shake. That calm wasn't weakness. It was the sign of someone who had finally chosen herself. While he was still stuck in his ego, caught up in his distractions and convinced she'd never leave, she was detaching, bit by bit, silently, powerfully. And now, in the stillness of her absence, he finally understands what he gave up. She was the one who brought peace into chaos, the one who softened his rough edges without ever trying to change him. She listened without judgment, supported without conditions, and loved without holding score. But for a long time, he couldn't see the value in that. He mistook her consistency for predictability. He assumed that because she stayed through his mood swings, his silence, his hot and cold behavior, she always would. He got used to her patience, as if it were endless. He thought her love would keep pouring, even when he gave nothing in return. But love doesn't run on entitlement. It runs on mutual care. And she was the only one doing the work. There's a unique kind of ache that comes when you lose someone who brought peace into your life. Not excitement, not chaos, not drama, just peace. That kind of love is rare because it's rooted in emotional maturity. She didn't just show up when it was easy. She showed up when he was hard to love, when he was distant, when he was withdrawn, when he didn't even know how to express what he needed. She filled in the gaps with patience and understanding, hoping that one day he'd meet her, but halfway never came. And somewhere along the line, her hope became exhaustion. He remembers now the things he used to overlook, the way she smiled when he was lost in thought, the little texts she sent just to check in, the way she made his world quieter, safer, without ever demanding anything in return. She didn't need to control him. She didn't try to compete for his attention. She just wanted to feel chosen. But instead, she always felt like an afterthought, someone he'd circle back to when it was convenient. Now he'd give anything for one more chance to show her she was never an option. But that chance is gone. The irony is, it wasn't her absence that made him realize her worth. It was her calm. It was the way she didn't come back. No dramatic messages, no desperate attempts to get his attention. Just distance, just dignity, just peace. That's what stung the most. Her refusal to engage in the same cycles. Because for the first time, he couldn't manipulate the outcome. He couldn't guilt her. He couldn't pull her back with breadcrumbs. She'd outgrown the game. And when someone outgrows chaos, they become unreachable to those who still live in it. He started comparing everyone to her. The way she listened, the way she stayed grounded when everything else was falling apart, the way she made love feel safe. But no one else brought that same energy. And that's when he realized he didn't just lose her. He lost the version of himself that existed in her presence. She made him better without asking for anything more than honesty and effort. And now he's left with silence where her presence used to be, replaying conversations in his head, wishing he had been more present, more aware, more grateful. The pain of regret is heavy, but it's heavier when it's tied to someone who never tried to hurt you. She loved him gently, and he broke that softness with indifference. Now he's learning the hard truth. When someone leaves in peace, they rarely come back, because that kind of exit comes after countless second chances, after quiet disappointment, after nights spent wondering if staying was self-love or self-betrayal. And when she finally chose herself, it wasn't a statement, it was a release. One that left him standing in the ruins of what he took for granted, knowing full well he'll never find that kind of calm again. And in the end, what he's left with isn't just the memory of her, it's the realization of what her presence truly meant. She wasn't loud in her leaving, but the silence she left behind echoed louder than any argument ever could. Her dignity wasn't just strength, it was clarity. She didn't need to prove her worth on the way out because she had already lived it every day she stayed. And now, while he sits with the weight of regret, she walks forward in peace. Not bitter, not broken, just done. And that more than anything is what he'll never forget. Because she didn't leave to get his attention, she left because she finally had her own.